Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Starcasticy and Remarky show of all time. This is Starcastic Remarks, the only Dallas Stars fan-led podcast. Alongside Chris and James, my name is Ryan. We thank you for joining us here tonight. Thank you to our sponsors, BetterHelp and DraftKings Sportsbook. Use that promo code THPN next time you go and use their services. We've got lots of things that have happened in the last week and lots of things to talk about on the personal side. But obviously, first, we got to start with the newlywed over here. James, how's it going?
James is back.
Yeah, I'm back. It was a long that was a longer break for me because we had a long break before. And then when y'all finally came back, I still wasn't back yet. That was like when I left, pretty much. So it's been nice not having to drive 2 hours to see the person I love the most.
Aw, boo, Sappy.
He's got to be that way.
She probably won't even hear that either. So
I know. Why? What are you doing? Our women don't listen to this.
Yeah, right. Well, and Chris, on I guess a professional level, I guess you could say you got a little announcement too, right?
I'm not getting paid for it, but sure, I'll call it professional. That makes me sound better. But I am going to be a staff writer for 100 Degree Hockey here in Austin, Texas. They cover the Texas Stars as the lone independent news organization that devotes coverage to them. So I'll be doing some game reviews, some feature pieces, and I actually have my first article out right now on 100degreehockey.com. And it's over the prospect tournament. I cover some of the prospects that we're going to talk about today, and I'm going to get in a little even more detail on this podcast than I did in the article. So I got a lot to talk about. Watch both the games. It was really fun, and I'm going to be writing a lot more this year, and you can find all my stuff there.
That's going to be really interesting, and it's going to be fun from a podcast side, Chris, just to get and hear about what the prospects are doing down there in the AHL. And it's going to be even more interesting now because all the ones, pretty much that we expected to make the team have made the team now with Logan, obviously with Maverick, and I mean, maybe even Bischel makes the team this year, but we'll talk about that when we get there. I know we got to pump the brakes a little bit, but it's still exciting. It's exciting to have somebody like you, who's going to be kind of around the rink for all the home games, and we'll see moving forward how that goes for the Stars, and if any of those guys gets up to the NHL level up here in Dallas.
Yeah, and the Texas Stars will be a lot more interesting this year. Last year, we kind of knew like those guys are going to be the guys getting the lion's share of the minutes. This year, there's a lot of room for people to kind of decide they're going to be the first line guys. So it'll be interesting to see how the Texas Stars go. Might not be as good, but maybe they'll be even better with some of the guys we saw at the prospect tournament.
Well, before we get into that, if you would go and join the Discord, that's our latest thing that we have going on. James and his no longer fiance, but his wife, Samantha, put that together for us. It's fantastic. It's the best place where you can hang out with other remarkies, I guess is what we can call them. And we're all three of us are also on there every once in a while, just kind of talking about, and especially when the games get really bad, which thankfully we didn't have to do too much last year. James likes to post cat videos and cat pictures and cat memes and stuff. So it gets pretty interesting, especially when the games are bad.
And it's a great place for all of us to vent.
Yes, especially before we do the podcast, So go and join the Discord, and we'd appreciate you if you would do that. And then also tonight, just as a special side note, it's been a while since we've done this, but we're going to open up the phone lines. We checked it with Cooper. We tested it, and it worked. So we'll see how this goes. That number, if you want to call, it's 214-810-1740, and we'd love to talk to you about whatever. And we'll probably open that up towards the end of the show. But without further regard, let's go ahead and just get right into this, and let's talk about the Traverse City tournament. Well, I guess tournament in quotations. I guess it was two teams now. So obviously, for those that don't know a lot about the Traverse City tournament, it used to be the tournament, especially even, I would say 6 years ago. There was up to like 7 or 8 different teams that would bring their prospects up to Traverse City, Michigan, and they would do just a little, round and robin kind of tournament with the prospects. And unfortunately, that has kind of diminished down to two teams, which is the Stars and the Red Wings, and that was it. And I was listening to a podcast earlier, the DLLS guys, and if Jim Nill was not the general manager of the Dallas Stars, I don't think the Dallas Stars would be going to this either. But he is very loyal to the Red Wings organization and to that tournament in particular. So, but regardless of all of that and all the background on there, Chris, what did you see out of the two games? Because you got to watch both of them. You even wrote your first 100-degree hockey article on it. I only got to see a little bit of it. What's some takeaways from both of those games that you saw out of the Traverse City tournament?
Yeah, the big obvious takeaway was the Red Wings have been drafting higher for a while now because the Stars got beat both games. The first game was it ended up being pretty rough. It was 5-1, crazy third period for the Wings prospects. They scored all 5 goals in the third period. But some really interesting Stars prospects that were there. Probably the number one guy that we've been talking about all summer and talked to all about last year, Liam Bichsel, was kind of the shiny toy that was on the roster for the Stars there. And night one, he kind of stunk it up, to be honest. He finished the night with a -4 and was on the ice for all 5 goals against. And it's not like he was primarily responsible for all 5 of those goals, but there was a couple that were pretty bad. And at least one that he was directly responsible for. It was an outlet pass out of his own zone. He passed it directly to a Red Wing in the neutral zone, and they turned around and scored. His second game was a little bit better. I still don't think he played great overall in the whole prospect tournament, which is kind of rough, especially for a guy that a lot of us are wanting to make a push for the NHL roster, which, by the way, he played the second game on his right side. He is a left-handed defenseman, but he's got played on his right-hand side. He has played his right-hand side before. In his interviews last year, he said he's comfortable playing the right-hand side, so there's definitely potential for that. But yeah, he didn't play great. Overall, he uses his size really well. Obviously, that's the main thing everyone talks about. He's a huge 6'6" guy. He knows he's 6'6", unlike some people that we've had on the team. I mean, we had Alexiak the first time around. He had no idea how big he was. He didn't use it at all. But Bichsel does. He blocks people off the puck. He wins puck battles all the time. He pushes piles. He's great at that. And he cannot stick check to save his life, or at least he couldn't during these two games. He was like the exact opposite of Miro Heiskanen. Like, take Miro, flip him upside down, and that's Liam Bichsel.
Except Miro Heiskanen would be a little bit taller if that were the case too.
Yeah, Miro Heiskanen would be taller.
Okay, so this is just a prospect tournament, right? So it's there's not much to take out of this. It's the beginning of everything. He's probably going to be at camp anyways. But for Stars fans, and yeah, this I'll steal Ardell's word over here, or I guess Sean Shapiro's word. Shapiro wrote that Bichsel left Stars fans wanting. So wanting more, hopefully expecting more. And it sounds like he didn't exactly deliver on the excitement that Stars fans have for him going into the training camp.
Yeah, I think you're good. Sorry, go ahead, James.
It's going to be tough for him coming over from Europe, especially after playing deep into – he played in Sweden, right, in the Swedish league?
Yes.
Playing deep into that Swedish league, I mean, his team went deep in the playoffs. It's going to be hard to flip from games that mean that much back to you're kind of ground zero again. So you gotta start back up, and now you got to do it on a smaller rink. So starting back up on the season, I don't think that's too odd that it looks so rough, because that's something he's not used to playing on, and he played on it a little bit on the Texas Stars, but went back. So there's going to be an adjustment period, that's for sure.
Yeah, I think the big takeaway is that it didn't hurt him very much that he didn't play great. But if he wanted to try and make a huge push this training camp to force the coach's hand and show that he's good enough to be in the NHL spot, he didn't do that starting off. So it didn't hurt him really, but he doesn't really have a chance anymore to do something crazy and find a way onto the NHL roster to start the season, in my opinion. But I also think he's for sure like the 8th defenseman for the Dallas Stars. So if there's an injury in Dallas where he'll be able to get to play night in, night out, he probably comes up, and he probably is the guy that's in the lineup over is it Blackwell that we signed as the 7th defenseman, or is that that our forward on the 4th
Brendan
line?
Smith.
Brendan Smith. Thank you. Yeah, he'd probably play over Brendan Smith if there was an extended injury that put someone on IR. But for now, he's most likely going to be Texas Stars. We might see a Harley situation at the end of the year, especially if Lundqvist doesn't work out and Miro does end up playing on his left side. But yeah, likely that he plays the majority of his season in Cedar Park.
So let's move off of Bixel a little bit because, we kind of expected that anyways, that he was going to be on the AHL roster more than likely to start the season, unless he decides to go back to the Swiss League again. But I doubt that. But when I was looking at the roster, Chris, the thing that really surprised me a little bit in the past couple of years, we've really been looking at the forwards, and the forwards are the big names and in the prospect system for the Dallas Stars. And that's not the case anymore. When you look at the defensemen that the Stars took there, it's a lot of big names and a lot of guys that are expected to kind of take that next step. You got Emil Hemming, who was last year's number 1 overall pick. Obviously, you got Bixel. You got Kyrou. You've also got White. You got Bertucci. And so all
Luke
5
Chris
of those guys,
pretty solid.
Yes, exactly. That was something I noticed as well. But I just thought that was interesting, that now that those prospects in Maverick Bourque, Logan Stankoven, and Wyatt Johnston, those guys have graduated to the big league. And now we're seeing that the depth on the defensive side is actually stronger than on the forward side, I would say.
Yeah, it definitely, you could argue that, I think. There's definitely a bigger gap between the defensemen that are still there, other than Bixel, and the NHL than there was between Stankoven and Bourque and the NHL, I feel like. Kyrou and Chris both had some pretty tough defensive miscues in this game, especially with the speed that the Red Wings prospects had. They were getting blown by quite a few times, but both Kyrou and Chris were very confident with the puck on their stick. I mean, the power plays for the Texas Stars was probably the best part. Not the Texas Stars, the Dallas Stars prospects was probably the best part of this tournament. And it was largely because those two were quarterbacking power plays, and they were dancing people out of their shoes on the blue line, getting good shots on net with men in front looking for deflections. So offensively, those guys look great, but I feel like they have quite a ways to go defensively, both of those guys. And I think those two are probably the ones you're looking at as closest. Maybe Punnett is a good example of a solid D guy that might be close, but he honestly didn't look great either. So I think our defensemen are still a good bit away from consistently being in an NHL lineup.
Okay. And then I also did want to mention, just because I have to, and I thought this was cool, and Ardell also reminded me, but Matthew Seminoff, friend of the show, who came on a couple of years ago, and everyone, there was a couple of people that are like, well, yeah, he's a 6th round pick. Of course he's turning some heads. He could, honestly, he's not going to be that offensive juggernaut, I feel like, but I think this is a guy and a kid who, by the way, was captain for this tournament for these 2 games, which that says a lot for Matthew Seminoff, and how much I believe it was the Texas Stars coaching staff that were the coaching staff.
I think it was mostly,
right?
Yeah. I think they had some development guys that did some stuff too that normally aren't Texas Stars guys, but yeah.
Probably Peverly, maybe Bishop. Ben Bishop was there too. Maybe who knows? Doesn't matter. But anyways, he was chosen as the captain by that coaching staff. That's a pretty big thing to be honored with that. And he's a guy that I think could be a very good bottom 6 forward for this team. More a Roddick Foxell like guy.
Yes.
Obviously not as big, but he's a really good penalty killer. He's got some of that leadership quality that I think that even Foxa didn't have. And, I'm excited for him. I really am rooting for that guy to make it to the big leagues.
Yeah, Seminoff is absolutely all over the radar. And exactly for a 4th line role, he is amazing for. if we lose a fourth liner, he's honestly probably on the short list to get called up if we lose a fourth liner for an extended period of time. That's how well Simonov plays that role. He shockingly played almost every game for the Texas Stars last year. I think he played 70 games, and he had less than 20 points all year. And that just shows how impactful he was off the scoring sheet, both the penalty kill and just defensively. And really his tenacity and his ability to win puck battles is the main thing that sticks out for him. And in this prospect tournament, he did show more and more offensive ability, and his potential for offense, I think, is a lot higher than it was for Faksa. It's kind of like Sam Steele has that potential to score a lot more than most fourth liners do. And that's kind of what it looks like to me. So if Simonov has a good start to this year in Texas, he for sure could be on the short list for a call up for one of those bottom six roles. Absolutely. Because he plays that role, that grinder role, like you're talking about, Ryan, just perfectly. And he is absolutely turning heads, and he's way above what anyone thought he would be last year. So
very good defensive forward. 2-way game is definitely up there. And that's something that I've seen, especially him being in the AHL last year, something that I saw him do very, very well.
His penalty killing is crazy. He closes gaps so quick.
Now, obviously, there's a couple of other players I want to ask you about real quick, but then we got to move on. But Chase Wheatcroft and Kyle McDonald, those are probably the two top guys that I think from an offensive standpoint that might be the next step up to make the team. Obviously, there's not a lot on that right now for them, but what did you see out of their games and those two games up in Traverse City?
McDonald definitely did not show up very much during the tournament. I mean, he looked pretty slow. He couldn't really make anything happen. That was definitely a guy I was looking to show something, because he's really fighting for an everyday spot on the Texas Stars is his primary goal right now. And I would say not a great start with the prospect tournament, but the whole Dallas Stars prospects had trouble creating offense in general. Wheatcroft was fantastic. I mean, he was the most skilled guy for the Stars during those two games. He is a dangle machine, and he likes to shoot. I mean, if there's any guy who's going to become a top six forward from this group, it's Wheatcroft. One other guy that I don't know if I'd say likely or probable, but might be able to take the actual extra forward spot actually is Arttu Huru. That's Hyry. He was fantastic with Wheatcroft and Emil Hemming on their top line. He scored a goal in the first game and had a great screen on the only other real goal scored in the second game. And offensively, he looked fantastic. And he's 25 years old. Stars signed him as a free agent this offseason. And that that 13th forward spot for Dallas is wide open. So that's something that's going to be fought for during camp. And Huru got himself a head start for it with this prospect tournament. Really, he was fantastic. He played 5-on-5, shorthanded, and power play, and was one of the best players in every aspect of it. And he started the first game with not as much ice time in the first period. And as the tournament went on, as those 6 periods went on, more and more and more you saw Huru. So he really might be on the Stars. If there's anyone on this prospect team that would be in Dallas, I say Huru has the best chance, honestly.
Wow. Okay. That's really interesting to hear that. So, anybody else that you wanted to kind of highlight before we move on, Chris?
Emil Hemming, he was the number 1 or first round draft pick that the Stars got. He did well. He scored a goal. Like I said, he was on that top line with Wheatcroft and Huru. So that's the other guy that will be looking to be a top 6 guy in the future. He absolutely has the skills. He is a dangler, and he has great eyesight. I mean, he made some crazy passes in the offensive zone after doing a whole lap all the way around the zone. So it'll take him a little while to get there for sure. I think he's 18, so he's got a while to go, but that's definitely a name to keep an eye on for the next 2 or 3 years.
Well, and especially when you get that first round pick slapped on your forehead, that right there is a lot to live up to. And I mean, there's a lot of players who recently have done that for the Stars. I mean, Maverick Bourque is a perfect example of that. He wasn't taken in, the top half of the first round. He was actually taken in the bottom half, and he's got a spot on the team. He on the NHL roster. So
yeah, and it'll be interesting to see where he plays this season, because he could be in Europe, he could be in Cedar Park. He could play in a number of places.
Well, hopefully Cedar Park, so you can get to see him a little bit more. That'll be really interesting moving forward. So, okay, let's move on from this, and I kind of want to move into training camp a little bit. Training camp is coming up, as is the first preseason game for the Dallas Stars, which I believe is on Saturday of this upcoming week. So, for me, at least it's felt like training camp has gotten shorter and shorter and shorter. Yes. I remember 10 years ago, and I'm showing my age a little bit, that it would be like a full week almost of training camp. But now it's like these guys work out so much and they're just in shape all year round that they just need to know the systems and how things work and what the coaches want them to do. And then they just need 2 or 3 days to get acclimated to that system, and then they go on. I think that's incredible. First off, that's just nuts.
Yeah, training camp starts Thursday. The first preseason game is Saturday.
There we go. So what I want to ask each of you guys, and I'll let James have the floor first. What is your biggest storyline? What's the biggest thing? What's the biggest whatever thought going into training camp for this season? What are you most looking forward to? James, I'll let you have the floor first.
Well, first of all, Thomas Harley is still not signed, so that's going to be fun. But other than that, it's still on the defenseman like it was last year. Like, who are you going to see? How are they going to play? Unfortunately, this year, it's less of who are we going to pick between, because we don't really have any other options. They're playing. So we're just going to have to watch them and see what happens. I mean, there's not nearly as many questions this year as last year. We have all of our forwards look amazing still. On paper, it looks incredible. The defenseman is really where the questions come up. Who's gonna play better? Is Lundqvist going to finally take that step, or are we gonna have to find someone else like off the free market or something? I don't know.
Well, see, that's the thing. I don't think they need to go out and get anybody. They loaded up on right-handed defensemen. Now it's not the right-handed defenseman we wanted, but it's Lyubushkin. It's Miro. Miro is probably, I know a lot of people are going to be unhappy about it, but he's probably going to play on the right side again, at least to start the year. You've got Dumba, and I even think that Brendan Smith has played both sides before, even though I believe he is left-handed. So he's had some experience with that. So, and then add Nils in there. So that's 5 guys that could play on the right side easily. So I don't even necessarily think that's a question. I think the biggest thing is just who's going to play with who.
Yeah.
And this is something that I'll throw this in a little bit, because this was in the season preview on Victory Plus. But they talked about it was actually Razor. He's like, you just draw the number 4 and then draw a circle around it.
Yep.
And it's like, in this situation, Miro plays with this person. In this situation, Miro plays with this person. It's just, so maybe that's the way it's going to be again, but that will be interesting. Chris, what's the most exciting or biggest thing you're looking forward to for training camp?
Yeah, I definitely agree. It's the defenseman and who's going to play with who and who's going to play where. Because if you look at our top 6 D-men, and those are pretty set. I mean, Lundqvist may not actually be the top 6, but he's for sure going to be there at least for the beginning of the season, I feel like. But if you look at them, the top 3 are all left-handed, and then the bottom 3 are all right-handed. And that's what makes this so weird, is because you can't have your 4th best defenseman playing against the other. You can't have him playing against McDavid. I mean, that's really the issue that we're looking at here. And that's why Heiskanen is probably staying on the right side, so you can have Heiskanen and Harley being able to stop those guys. The other issue of, Harley not signing yet, I'm sure it'll be another Jason Robertson situation where he'll sign last minute, but I don't know, not ideal. And then the one other storyline is who's going to be the 13th forward, who's the extra guy for the Stars. And that's something that's actually not decided. And we're going to find out at the end of training camp, and that's who it's going to be. So that'll be exciting to look at.
The other thing we actually haven't mentioned is that the first line's going to look different. I mean, it happened late in the season anyway, so we kind of saw some stuff coming in and out. But you don't want to change the lines too much, so you kind of just throw whoever's the oddball wherever, But there should be more synergy for the top line through the whole season. Hopefully we can find someone who sticks well with Robertson and Hintz and stays there the whole season, because Pavelski was spectacular, but he definitely slowed down in that second half of the season, and that line just never got back to what it was known for 2 or 3 years.
Yep.
So that was the interesting thing for me, James. That was actually going to be, since y'all talked about the defenseman, that I was going to bring up the forward lines, because that's still up in the air. I mean, it truly is. I mean, you could see some weird things, like maybe Maverick Bourque gets thrown on the top line because
Absolutely.
Stankoven and Ben and Johnston played so well together, and then so did Duchesne with Marchment and my goodness, I can't think. Seguin, thank you. Sorry. So, but it's going to be really interesting to see how those three lines are going to be adjudicated with the departure of Joe Pavelski. And I think it's going to be fine in terms of offense when it comes to Logan and when it comes to Maverick. And I think they're going to be able, between the two of them, maybe even eclipse the offensive numbers that Joe Pavelski had last year. But what are they going to be able to bring with the intangibles? Are they going to be able to play that defensive style, which I feel like Stankoven, we saw, especially in the playoffs, that obviously he's able to do that. But, Maverick coming in, he only played a couple of games in the NHL last year. What's that going to entail? Is his two-way game, is he ready for that kind of pressure being on a top line like that? I mean, that for me, that's the most exciting thing for me going into training camp, is taking a look at those forward lines and seeing how they all stack up.
Yeah, I think the best thing about that is it's probably going to be one of the three skilled kids, Maverick, Stank, or Bourque. And I think, honestly, you try those guys until something works. And once something works, you ride it, I feel like. Because any three of those guys have the skill potential to be able to play in that top line. And that quote-unquote third line with Ben and whoever of the two is on there is still going to be a high-scoring, dangerous line as well. So that's what it's not nervous that we don't know who the other top liner is going to be, because we have three amazing options to throw up there.
And I really think
so many options, it's ridiculous. I mean, anybody can play with Rope and Robo, and it would probably be fine, honestly.
Yeah, we could put Steele up there and they'd be great.
I feel like more of it comes down to, where do you want Johnston to be long-term on this team? Do you want him to stay at center and end up being the second line center? Because that's where his trajectory is right now, if not the first line somehow, if Hintz falls off a little. I mean, he would have to fall off a lot, but it's where do you want him to be? Do you want Stankoven to take over that center line? I mean, Bourque, Stankoven, and Johnston can all play center. I mean, they all have done it before. It's a matter of who you want to be there.
Yep.
So we'll have to see how those line combos kind of come up in training camp. And I think we're going to see a little bit of everything, honestly. That's what's so exciting about this is, despite the Stars team being really good and being a Stanley Cup contender again this year, there's no solidarity of who's going to play with who, other than maybe a couple of pairings. Like, I mean, Ben and Johnston, maybe that's a solidified thing, but like Duchesne, Seguin, Marchment, that I could see that staying together. Hintz and Robo, obviously that's probably going to stay together too. But I mean, the only really thing that you could probably look at other than that is just the bottom line and seeing what it's going to look like, because it's going to look a little different. And Sam Still, I think, is going to center that fourth line, in my opinion. And then we'll see Dadonov in a little bit of a different role, and a scrappy role in that fourth line. And then Colin Blackwell comes in from Chicago. So that'll be interesting as well. But any other things that we need to talk about with training camp? There's so many other things, but is there anything that we're not talking about that we should be talking about?
I'd like to see Bixel playing on the right side more during preseason, at least just to see what it could be, maybe. Because if you're not able to make a deal at the deadline, like for Tanev, like that was an amazing deal that Nil made. What's the chances he can do that 2 years in a row? Then having the option of Bixel having a great year in Cedar Park, and then coming up the same way Harley did in a number 6 role, that would be awesome. And the only real way that's going to be possible is if he's on the right side, I think. So
Yes.
It would be good to see him on the right side a lot.
I would be surprised if he made it in on the left side, honestly.
Yeah, that would be interesting.
Okay. Anything else?
Nah, I'm good.
Nope. Okay. All right. So let's move on. This is another interesting thing because I thought about telling you guys to go and watch it, but I also wanted to get y'all's raw opinions on the Victory Plus app. If you have not gone and watched it, Josh and Razor actually did a deep dive into the season preview of the team. So they did just a very basic overall arching look at it. It's like a 5-minute video. And then they went into specifics with each position, with the forwards, with the defensemen, and with the goaltending. It got progressively longer as you go back. Forwards was about 7.5 minutes. Defense was about 8 minutes, and the goaltending was about 9. So it's a lot of good information, and I've got a lot of notes because I watched all of them, and I wanted to get y'all's thoughts on it. And really, there was only one thing that I wanted to mention in the overarching preview that they did. It's like the 5.5 minute one. They kind of talked about a youth movement, which, I kind of hadn't thought about all that much, but in all reality, it is. I mean, these young guys going into this season are going to be huge, and in different ways, right? So we know what Logan Stankoven can do, and we saw his two-way game kind of come out, especially in the playoffs, and his offense exploded when he first got onto the team full time. But there's going to be a lot of expectations on him this season to contribute more with Pavelski leaving. Same thing with Maverick Bourque. He's the AHL MVP. There's going to be a lot of pressure on him. And I think more than anybody, there's going to be more pressure on Wyatt Johnston. Wyatt Johnston is the next superstar of this team. He's the next Miro Heiskanen. Miro Heiskanen has had his coming out party, and he's shown that he can do stuff in the playoffs. Wyatt Johnston has done that the past 2 years now. And now the question for him is he going to be able to take this team and lead this team in a way that, maybe we didn't expect from him last season? I think those expectations are there, to be completely honest with you, for him. It is extremely, extremely high for Wyatt Johnston. Could we see a 40-goal season from him? Could we see him maybe get to a point per game mark? I think that's a possibility. And then there was even something that the DLLS guys talked about as well that I thought was really interesting, because I always thought, Miro would be the next one. But, maybe Wyatt Johnston is that next leader for this team. Maybe he is the next captain after Jamie Benn hangs up his skates and calls it a career. So this is the first step for these three guys in particular. And for more than any of those guys, Wyatt Johnston is going to have to be a guy that really steps up, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. And he definitely is getting, at least in the beginning of his career, the you're going to be captain treatment. I mean, we saw Crosby. He stayed with Mario Lemieux at the beginning of his career, and Wyatt Johnston stayed with Joe Pavelski, and he played on a line with Jamie Benn. I mean, if you've ever been trying to create a captain, that'd be the way to do it. So he absolutely is leading this kind of youth movement, like you're saying. And for sure, both Stankoven and Bourque have some crazy high expectations for both rookies. Bourque is the number 2 favorite to win the Calder Trophy, and Bourque is in the top 10. And those are 2 rookies that are not just, if they can give us something, we're happy. No, those guys are a part of this hockey team and are expected to contribute. And it's going to be interesting to see how 2 rookies are able to handle that kind of pressure, and to see if they'll be able to execute the way that everyone expects and needs them to be able to.
Well,
And
and it's different, for them than it is for like Celebrini or Bedard, because those guys are not on Stanley Cup contending teams. Like
Yeah.
Stankoven is, Bork is, and so is Wyatt Johnston. Wyatt Johnston has more playoff success and more playoff experience than a lot of guys his age do right
Yeah.
now. He has more. He has weight. He like Bedard has not played in the playoffs yet.
Mhm.
So I think that's the thing that we really need to see those three guys step up in the regular season, and then Johnston needs to continue that push that we've seen from him in the last 2 years in the playoffs, because I think he's going to be the one that puts us over the top of the hill, in my opinion.
Yeah.
He's going to be the deciding factor.
Johnson for sure is like, y'all talk about him being a future leader. He's a leader on the team now at the age he is now. The second half of the season was his line entirely. I mean, they went on a tear for the last like fourth of the season too, and just couldn't stop scoring. And then in both playoff runs that Johnston has been a part of, he's been a scorer. He has not just been little rookie hanging out, having fun time in the playoffs. He's been a huge part of both of our playoff runs that he's been a part of. I mean, he's done absolutely spectacularly. And like you said, Ryan, he has more playoff career than a ton of players. He's 38 career playoff games already.
Yeah,
that's incredible. He's only played
That's
2 seasons. He's played 2 seasons and has 38 games, 38 games in the playoffs and 22 points. That's stupid good.
Yep. And with
then over here with Weston saying Bork has more playoff experience than Bedard. And
at least Bork was sitting on the plane with the team that was in the playoffs. But yeah, with the current way that the salary cap is in the NHL, you have to have players on entry level contracts like these three guys are, and they have to produce. And that's how you have the best team, and that's how you go on crazy dynasties like these other teams have been able to do. And you do them fast, and you do them because you're the best team by a mile. And that's what it looks like the Stars are shaping up into. Because if these three guys pan out the way they're supposed to, the Stars will be the best team in the NHL by a pretty wide margin.
And that's what's so exciting about this team going into the season, is that those three guys are at the forefront at this point. There's 2 cores on this team, which is really cool. You got the veteran core with Sagan, with Ben, I'd throw Esa Lindell in that core, and then you got the young core with those 3 guys, and then you've also got Bixel, who is making his way up there. And
that's the next new core.
Yeah, that's the next new core. And then you've got one in the middle with like Miro and Hintz and Robo, and it's just weird. It is. So maybe they have actually like 3 cores on this team. It's ridiculous. So there is a youth movement for this team moving forward, especially for this season. Okay, specifically with the forwards, this was something that I brought up, that after they were eliminated in the playoffs by the Edmonton Oilers, and this is something I wanted to see a little bit more of going forward. And this is something that Razor talked about. He said that most everyone is coming back in the forward group, obviously, except for Joe, and Mav and Stanky are going to have to replace those offensive numbers. But that fourth line is going to look a little bit different. And he used the term "stupid cowboy," and I know that seems silly, but that's
Explain.
He's talking specifically about the physicality of this team that they need to show more of going forward into the playoffs. That was something that they were missing out of their fourth line that they didn't get at all in that series against the Oilers. And the Oilers, to their credit, pounded and went after our defensemen like crazy with their forwards. So that's something I'm really excited to see, especially with Colin Blackwell. He's a guy that likes to hit, and I'm really excited to see that. And then even on the defensive side, which we'll get to in a minute, with Dumba and Lyubushkin, those guys had a combined 400 hits last season. So that physicality aspect of this team is something that Jim Nill made a priority going into the offseason, especially on July 1st. You could see that with the signings that he made.
Yeah, and there's definitely still the skill there too. I mean, we've got Evgeny Dodonov on our fourth line with Sam Steele, who's shown that he can score too. So it's not just like we're just added a brute fourth line. No, it's a fast fourth line that can hit and can score, and that's what's so awesome about this forward group is without a doubt, we have the best depth at forward. And I think our forward group got better, honestly. I think Bork and Stankoven are going to prove that this team is even better than last year's.
And then one of the things that was really intriguing to me was, and Razor talked about it. So last year for the Stars, they had 8 players who scored over 20 goals, 20 plus goals. Obviously, with Wyatt Johnston leading them with 32, which 32 goals on a team that was second in the NHL is almost unheard of. That's very rare to have 130 goals, or actually, I don't want to say that. I don't know if there was another 30 goal scorer, but anyways, a player leading a team with only 32 goals. Typically, when you see a team like this, those guys have at least a 40 goal scorer, at least. And that wasn't the case for the Stars. So his question was, are we going to see a more balanced offense like we saw this year? Or do we need to see a return of the 100-point season from Robo? Do we need to see, I don't want to say a top-heavy offense, but a more top-heavy offense with some supplemental offense from those bottom 3 lines or something like that? And I think the answer is yes to both. I think we need to see a little bit more from Robertson. I think he needs to get back in the 40 goal range, in my opinion. I think he can get there, obviously. And then I just think we need to see just a little bit of supplemental stuff from some other players. And there's one other player that he was really intrigued about that I'll mention in a second. But what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree. It was a shocking season by how spread out the goal scoring was, and that's not a bad thing. But when you look at 20 goal scorers, I think we had 2 more than any other team in the league. I think we had 7, and the next closest had 5. So that's crazy. That's still going to be the identity of this team, is that the scoring is going to be spread out. That is for sure. But if you look at the stats last year, Robertson's shooting percentage finally dropped. that was kind of the key thing that happened. His shooting percentage dropped, but I think kind of his confidence kind of fell with it too, because he also shot less this season. So he needs to look back and see what happened there and notice that just because the shooting percentage goes down doesn't mean I'm going to stop shooting. If anything, he needs to shoot more. He is a goal scorer's goal scorer. That is what Jason Robertson is, and he absolutely needs to get closer to that mark. And this may be sacrilegious to say, but with seeing what happened to Pavelski once the playoffs started, it makes you wonder, maybe there was more slippage from Joe Pavelski during the regular season than we were allowing ourselves to see. And maybe putting a guy like Wyatt Johnston or Logan Stankoven on that top line is going to bring it back to where it was in the Avengers days of not last season, but the season before, when that top line was carrying this team.
Here's the big thing that's going to change with that top line, though, because before, with Joe on it, it was very methodical, I'm going to pick the other team apart. And the few times that we saw Johnston on there instead of Joe, it was like high flying. We're just going to go dump it in, steal the puck from them, and just get in their face constantly. And that's going to be something that I think is going to be really fun to watch, because when that line was together, that was like the most fun watching the Stars that I had the whole season, was watching Rope and Robertson and Johnston just fly around the ice and just skate circles around everyone on the other team.
Yeah, and there's some truth to that, James, because when we saw that Joe Pavelski obviously was starting to look slow, and he was already slow, but he because of his hockey IQ, it always seemed like he was in the right spot at the right time. But it almost didn't seem to matter anymore. And then when they threw Johnson onto that line with those two guys, it's like something clicked. It was like a jump start for a car battery or something like that, like some jumper cables. It was insane to watch both of those two guys, Robo and Rope, kind of, I don't know, look rejuvenated. So that's one of those reasons why it's going to be really interesting to see what they start with in training camp, and if Wyatt Johnston starts on that top line.
Yeah, and I think the top line has a chance to be one of those crazy, ridiculous lines that we've seen in the past, like 2022 Flames top line of Gaudreau, Lindholm, Tkachuk. That was just insanely dominant, and it was, like James said, it was in your face constantly. 3 guys that can skate and can be all over you every minute that they're on the ice. I mean, and they can all finish, all of them. Yeah.
That's one big complaint that I still kind of have of Rope is he doesn't seem to shoot as much as his shooting percentage says he should. Every year he has like the highest on the team pretty much. So it's something. It's a part of it is he picks corners as well, and when you hit the post, it doesn't count as a shot. But the other part is that he really does. Sometimes he passes opportunities away to shoot, and
yeah,
that's because you have such great players on your line. But if you have the puck more with having a faster player, maybe you can just keep taking shots over and over and over again, get more opportunities even.
Yeah, and it sounds kind of cliche, but like you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. And for those guys with shooting percentages as high as they are, like that's what the superstars in this league, that's how they become superstars. They're shooting an insane amount. You look at Kucherov and Ovechkin, they shoot more than everybody by far. You got to get up to those numbers if you want to become a true top 10 player in the National Hockey League. And both Robertson and Rope are able to do that. Shoot the puck. You are the goal scorer. Go score.
Okay, Wayne Gretzky, aka Michael Scott. Anyways, so the player that he was actually really intrigued about was Rope Hintz. And that was someone who dominated in the playoffs 2 years ago. And last year he was not as big a factor. And I don't think he was necessarily talking just about the playoffs, but he was talking about that there's another side to Rope that still hasn't been seen yet. And we've seen glimpses of it in the playoffs 2 years ago, and we've seen some stretches of it, but we haven't seen the quote unquote elite player that we still think he is. He's a very good player. He's gonna give you 60 points at the very least, maybe even 70, but we have yet to see that eliteness from him that he can get up to a point per game, or maybe even 90 points up to there. So, and that was something that Razor was really intrigued about with Hintz. But the last thing about the forwards, and I kind of already mentioned it, was he would like to see them play with more edge. So, and I'm just guessing it's specifically when it comes to the forecheck, because that's what wears teams down in the playoffs. And we talk about Carolina with this all the time, and the fact that that is such a style that we love to watch and play. And that's why we like watching Carolina play, is the way that they play the game is very similar to the way that we want to see the Stars play. Maybe we see a little bit more edge to the forward group this upcoming season. Any thoughts on that?
That's something that those three new young guys, Stankoven, Bork, and Johnston, will be able to bring you too. More speed, more physical edge, more puck chasing.
And Stankoven, especially on that puck chasing part. I
Yes.
mean, we saw him just chase people back from the offensive zone, steal the puck from him, and have a breakaway. I mean, he did that at least twice, and he tried it many more times. So that's something that is gonna make the other team be more on their toes.
Okay, moving on to the D-men video that they had. The physicality was the biggest thing, was the very first thing that Razor talked about when Josh Bogorod asked him the question about this defensive group. And obviously this is the biggest question mark going into this training camp, is what they talked about. But he's still excited to see Bichsel and still thinks that there's something there, and maybe our expectations need to be tampered with the prospect tournament. But the fact that Razor still mentions that should raise that excitement a little bit more. And obviously with the size and the physicality of Bichsel, but something he talked about that Bichsel had that we haven't seen a lot of Stars defensemen have in the past 20 years is he used the word meanness. And when he said the word meanness, I thought first off about Derian Hatcher.
Yes.
Like, is this a Derian Hatcher-like player who's got a meanness to him, who's got a clutchness to him when they need a big hit? Is that something that Bichsel can do?
Bichsel is not just mean, he is terrifying. Every single time he tried to line up a hit in that prospect tournament, he never got one clean in the open ice. But every time he looked for one in the neutral zone, the entire barn started screaming, head up, head up, head up, head up, head up. Because they knew that guy was going to murder somebody if they had their head down. Everybody is terrified of Bixel. That is 100% true. He definitely has that Hatcher quality to him. That's a great call by Razor.
Well, the meanness factor is going to be really exciting once he does make his debut in Dallas. Fingers crossed that he does.
I think he will at some point this year, even if he doesn't start.
And then I kind of already talked about it, but he talked about how there's a number 4 and then all the defensemen are circled around him. It's like he just plays with all these different guys at different points.
Yeah,
and
that's how good Miro is. He is still by far the best player on this team.
And that's something that you have to talk about when you talk about the D-man is Miro Heiskanen. It is Miro's world. It's Miro's world, and we're just living in it.
And we never talk about it because it's just obvious. Like, Miro Heiskanen is the best defenseman. He's going to win a Norris at some point. We don't even have to talk about it because that's how good he is.
Well, so 2 things. That's interesting that you said that, because one of the things that he did talk about was that the only time the hockey world seems to notice Miro Heiskanen, and like everybody knows he's a good defenseman. He's top 10 in a lot of people's, top 10 defenseman lists or whatever, but they tend to really only pay attention in the playoffs. Yep. And then people are like, kind of realize like how good he truly is. And that's something that he doesn't get enough credit for because he doesn't play in a quote unquote Eastern market or, a Northeastern market or whatever, where most of these hockey writers are. So,
well, and it's even true. That's why the Norris often goes to the guy or the defenseman that has the most points, because that's the easiest thing that can turn people's heads. It's hard to show somebody, look how great Miro played against McDavid here tonight. You got to watch the whole game to actually see how great he was. And that's why he doesn't get those head turns. And that's why in the playoffs, when everyone's watching the whole game, everyone's like, wow, Miro is the best overall defenseman, because that's true. But if he wants to make a push for a Norris or having multiple Norris trophies, he's got to pump up the offensive numbers. And that's something that he absolutely can do. Otherwise, I think at some point he'll get one for sure. I mean, there's a lot of defensemen that were fantastic defensively that got one at some point, normally whenever it was just a slow offensive year for the D-men. But if he wants to go for multiple, like he's definitely capable of, I think he can show up more offensively, and I think he can do that a lot on the power play.
I think the 13 national games that Mato is talking about here, I think that will help. And whenever he goes to these, I know he really doesn't care all that much about winning a Norris. He'd rather win the Stanley Cup. But if he wants to be known as the best defenseman in the NHL and he wants to have a chance to win the Norris Trophy, he's got to play really well in those big markets, the Toronto, the Chicagos, the Bostons, and then when he gets on that national stage, he's got to be the best player easily on the ice, offensively and defensively. So we'll see what the season holds for Miro Heiskanen.
Yeah, he'd definitely take a cup over Norris, but we heard him last season. We talked about that before the year. He said he wants to be the best defenseman in the NHL. That is words from his mouth. So he might not be gunning for the trophy specifically, but he is looking to be the best at his profession.
Okay, the only other thing that I had notes on with what Razor was talking about with the D core is, in quotes, there's a little bit more punch than previous seasons, which that's going to be very, very exciting in my book, especially when those Edmonton Oilers come to town and we see how these guys can do against these, these big old guys from the Edmonton Oilers. And I know they've lost a couple of guys, like McLeod especially was a big hit leader for them. But I really think that's going to be a huge difference. Maybe not so much in the regular season. We won't see that as much. But when we get to the playoffs, I think that's going to be a huge difference maker for the Dallas Stars. So that's the most thing I'm excited about with this decor is that they just look a little bit meaner and a little bit nastier.
Yeah, a lot more punch for sure, but hopefully their feet are still able to keep up with the way the game is played. That's the big worry.
And I think Dumba especially can do that. And with the Stars getting rid of Suter, I think that helps. With the Stars not re-signing Hakanpää, I also think that helps a little bit in the puck moving side of the game. Because both of those guys, we complained about quite a bit, that the speed of what we wanted was just not there with those two guys. Okay. Last thing when it comes to the season previews from Victory Plus, obviously the goaltending. And the first thing we need to kind of talk about is the fact that this is obviously Jake Ottinger's net. It's not Casey DeSmith's net. We'll get to Casey DeSmith in a second. But the one thing we do need to acknowledge and mention is that there are 31 other teams that are always consistently looking for a guy like Jake Ottinger. And what I'm talking about is a bona fide number one elite goaltender. I mean, when you look at the Devils, that was something that they went out and did this offseason. Is they completely overhauled their goaltending tandem, and now they've got two veterans in that net. And then when you look in Vancouver with Thatcher Demko, he is absolutely one of those guys that is very similar to Jake Ottinger. I mean, Andrei Vasilevsky, Igor Shesterkin, the list goes on. There's not very many of those guys out there that teams can have. And we're just lucky in this organization with the Dallas Stars that we have a bona fide number one guy who there's no question that he's not going to lose his job. And this team only goes as far as Jake Ottinger can take them.
Yeah, that's 100% true. We saw last year, Jake Ottinger played solidly. He played pretty good in the playoffs. And the team is almost good enough to get past that, but you need a little bit extra from one part of your team to get to the Stanley Cup. That's why it's the hardest trophy to win. You can play good. The Stars played good in the Western Conference Final. They did, but they didn't have that one part of the team that stepped up and drug them across the finish line. And that's something that Ottinger definitely can do. And we're still waiting for him to have his blow up year and to really take the season into his own hands and be 100% dominant. We've seen that he has the capability to be the best goalie in the world, especially when you go back and look at the Calgary series. That is Jake Ottinger's best right there. And that is the best goaltender in the world. So he has the capability. He's got to be able to find it and to hold on to it for as long as possible. And it's hard to talk about the goaltending because, like you said, Ryan, he is for sure the number one. And really for Otter, he has all the skills. He has everything you want for a guy to have. It's just his mental. And how is he going to control that? How is he going to use it? We see him use it super well on road games. His road win record and his road save percentage and goals against are all way higher. He's got to find a way to get into that mindset, break through his own head and get into the road mindset at home too. That's why it's so hard to talk about because he's great. He's got everything. He's the perfect goalie. It's all in his head. That's what he's got to figure out. And it's hard to talk about that because, I mean, what are you going to tell him to do? Play better?
And I mean, in this last
opinion, I think you should play better, Jake Ottinger.
Exactly.
Can you just imagine Jeff Reese, the goaltending coach?
Dude, just
Otter, do better. Do better.
Oh, right. I forgot about that, dude.
The thing this year with him was just that injury in the middle that really, I think that really broke it up and hurt him quite a bit. I mean, if you remember, his save percentage was below 900 when we made it to I think that was the trade deadline. Yep. He ended the year at a 905. So needless to say, he picked it back up and he's very capable of doing that. And then in the playoffs, he played what he did what he does in the playoffs. So it's playing good. I mean, he had a 915. That's you can't really ask for much more than that. It's just a matter of being able to sustain that over a whole season like he did in 22-23 season.
Yeah, and another point about last year is that he was injured almost all summer too and didn't have a chance to really grow and improve on any specific things or to even try and maintain what he has now. This time he's had a full summer, fully healthy. He's been able to do what he wants, train what he wants, improve on what he wants. And yeah, if he can stay healthy all year long, I mean, he's poised to have a big season for sure.
It's really funny that you mentioned the road record and the home record, Chris, because that was one of the few stats that Razor talked about in the Victory Plus video. And so I looked it up. It's not drastically different, but there is one stat that is drastically different. And it's quite interesting. And this is just the basic stats. This is not like the advanced stats or anything like that. So he was 17-8-2 at home and 18-6-2 on the road. So almost identical, very, very similar numbers, right? His goals against average, he was 2.67 on the road, and then he was a 2.78 at home. So that's again a little bit more of a difference, but the one for me is the save percentage one, and it still is a decent metric to use when you're talking about goaltending. His save percentage at home was below 900. It was at a 898, but his road save percentage was a 912, which is incredible.
Yeah, you're top 10.
So it easily top 10 when you're on that. So what it is it the and we all know he loves playing in big games and he loves being the villain, especially in the away aspect, but maybe there's got to be some aspect of his game that he can take from the road that he can apply to the home. And the other question I had in my mind when Razor was talking about the difference between his home and his away record was maybe we see Casey DeSmith play more at home rather than on the road. Maybe that's an option that they can look at, and I think that you could definitely look at that and see if that's a logical thing to at least start the year with. I don't know how Casey DeSmith's numbers are at home versus the road, but that's got to be something that Jake Ottinger has got to figure out, is because 2 years ago he was fantastic at home and he was okay on the road. He was really bad at times at home, and then he was just superb on the road.
I got it. We boo him. We boo him all game. Make him feel like he's on the road.
There you go. No, see, Zach was right there with you. He
same time.
Right there with you. I was like, okay, we got to get this going. All right, everyone here in the all you remarkies, whatever we're calling you out there. Every time Ottinger makes a save at home, we just boo him. That would be the most interesting thing in the world, just to see. Oh, there's a solution right there. Boom. So, anyways, any thoughts on that? Any thoughts on that?
Nope.
No.
It's a strange phenomenon for him that he just tends to win on the road. It just happens. He had the second most road wins.
Yep. And it's all mental.
Probably behind Hellebuyck, it would be my guess, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So and to kind of wrap it up tonight, they kind of mentioned his chance of making Team USA for the Four Nations Cup, which I think he's got a decent chance of making. I don't think he would be the starter because you've got just ridiculous guys like Connor Hellebuyck, if I can talk. Thatcher Demko, and you've also got Jeremy Swayman out there who's kind of making a name for himself right now. But he's got a chance. And then they went into a little bit about DeSmith and that they're hoping they can make that same kind of chemistry that Otter and Wedgwood had before Wedgwood left for the Music City and went to Nashville. And then they also mentioned that the Stars have got a number 3 guy now who's got a little bit more NHL experience, which I thought that was noteworthy in Magnus Hellberg. So that's going to be a guy that I think you can rely upon a little bit more than the Stars could have relied upon with Matt Murray last season. That's a guy, and he's a number 3 guy, so obviously it's not going to be, perfect or whatever. But that I think that is a better upgrade there in that particular position and the number 3 goalie with Magnus Hellberg compared to Matt Murray, and I still think that's important to get some goaltending depth, especially.
Yeah, that's a sneaky good signing there, and it could be big if we have injury problems in the goaltender, because Hellberg absolutely can be an NHL goalie. He is more than capable, and he's going to be a really good security blanket to Remy and for the Texas Stars, and he can learn a lot from Hellberg. So it's a really good sneaky signing. I really like it after digging into it.
So I encourage you. There's 4 videos on the Victory Plus app. Go and download it because that's literally what the Stars organization wants you to do. It's the best way to support them in trying to this new venture that they have going out there. Go and download it. They got 4 videos on the season preview. They're excellent. And all the things that we just talked about are all the items that they talked about in those 4 videos. And maybe you think of some other things. If you think of some other things, let us know. Leave us a comment down below, and we'll get into that in our next episode. So I think that's going to do it here for us tonight, gentlemen. Is there anything else that we need to mention?
When your coworker asks you what you're doing this weekend, tell them you're watching the Stars and that they can watch them too for free. Tell them about Victory Plus. Spread
It's
it.
free.
It's free.
Yes, did y'all know it's free?
It costs no money.
Free. What's that company that made a big deal about it being free or whatever? I don't even remember. It was a while ago now. It was like a year ago.
Well put, Ryan.
All over. You can tell we're getting tired. I can't even think straight anyways. Okay, let's wrap it up here. Thank you guys so much for watching along with us. We've had up to 19 of you guys, on here live this
11
evening.
PM
There's even
on a Monday.
11 p.m. on a Monday. There's even more of you who are listening afterwards, which just shows us that there's a lot of people that are excited for this team moving forward into this season. Thank you to DraftKings Sportsbook and also BetterHelp for being our sponsors. Use that promo code THPN. SarcasticRemarks.com is the website. SarcasticRemarksShop.com is the merch store. It's the best way to support us. Follow us anywhere on social media. Join the Discord. And as always, if you click like and subscribe here on YouTube, we'd appreciate it. And then also leave us a 5-star review anywhere you listen to your podcast, whatever podcast platform of your choosing. Alongside Chris and James, my name is Ryan. We will catch you guys on the flip side. And we hope you guys have a fantastic morning, afternoon, evening, whenever you guys are listening. And we have a very brand new debut of a countdown video to take us out. And Chris particularly is going to love this one. You ready for this, Chris?
I'm ready.
You ready? I got to get this all set up for you because I really want to see your
Stall.
Chris poop. Chris poop poop poop. Chris poop poop poop. Chris poop. Chris poop 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 poop. Chris poop.
He plays this song almost every time we get off the air. This is so annoying.
Chris.
you guys.